who's participating in our virtual city council meeting that if you would like to speak on a particular item during public comment period, please click on the raise your hand icon at the bottom of the screen. You'll be prompted to speak up to 3 minutes when it's your turn. For those who is participating by telephone and who would like to make a public comment, please press *9 to request to speak. Thank you for your participation. Okay.
All right, thank you very much, City Clerk. I would like to call to order the Albany City Council meeting of Monday, April 20th. We are meeting at 7:30 p.m. As was noted by the City Clerk, this is a virtual meeting. Instructions on how to participate are on our website. And I'd like to call to order the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I do not have a flag to display. I don't know if the city had one to display, but I'm not quite prepared for that. If the city does not have one prepared, I'll just go ahead and lead the pledge, and you can point to whatever flag you might have handy or look that way. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, thank you, staff. There we go. Okay, next item on the agenda is roll call. City Clerk, please.
Councilmember Barnes. Who's here? Councilmember Moss.
Present.
Councilmember Nason. She's here. Vice Mayor McQuaid.
Here.
Mayor Pilch.
Here. Thank you. Moving on to ceremonial matters. At this time, I'd like to make a brief mayor's statement. And I'll note that the vice mayor would like to make a statement as well. And I invite any other council members who might wish to make a statement to do so after us. I wanted to say a few words about the ongoing situation, the response to the COVID-19 epidemic. First, a new order has come down from Alameda County Health. We join in many of our neighboring counties and other jurisdictions in requiring nose and mouth coverings in most situations when you're outside your home. When in doubt, cover up. The reason for this is to help control the release of the virus from a possibly infected person, yourself. We now know that you can carry the virus and be asymptomatic. So please comply and help stop the spread, protect others, and therefore protect yourself as well. Second, thanks are in order. Thank you to the city staff for all they have done and continue to do to respond to the epidemic. And thanks for them continuing to do the business of the city on top of that. And thanks to county and state leadership as well. Thank you to all those who are following the rules, sheltering in place, wearing masks, and social distancing / physical distancing. You are part of the army against COVID-19. And thank you so much to the frontline workers, certainly the doctors and nurses and all healthcare workers and professionals. You are directly protecting our health and helping the sick. But thank you also to the food workers and workers in other essential services. Thank you for bearing the increased risk while allowing us to continue our lives with as much normalcy as possible. Finally, I want to ask all my fellow electeds to keep up the fight for two things: increased testing and increased contact tracking. Everyone who should be tested needs to be tested, and test kits should be made available to all health facilities, and testing should be widely available and free. Contact tracking involves informing all those who may have been in contact with an infected individual and telling them to continue to shelter in place and limit contact, observe their health, and take whatever other measures health officials deem necessary. Both easy testing and contact tracing have proven to be important and effective measures in countries who have been successful in holding back their outbreaks. Be safe and be well. Vice Mayor, you had some remarks?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And thank you all for virtually joining the City Council in I think this is our third online City Council meeting. In the Bay Area counties that implemented early and aggressive shelter-in-place orders, the curve is flattening, showing this plan does work. But the data for Alameda County shows COVID-19 cases are still increasing, which is extremely disappointing. Alameda County has the 7th highest number of cases in this state. But the good news is that Albany cases are still showing as under 10. With that in mind, we need to continue and in fact increase our efforts for physical distancing. Alameda County issued a new order requiring cloth face coverings to be worn while inside of or waiting in line at essential businesses, while seeking health care, waiting or riding public transportation, and while working or volunteering at essential businesses. Not everyone is comfortable wearing facial coverings in public, but this is the new normal. With everyone wearing a covering, perhaps the fear of those wearing a mask will be eliminated for everyone. This does not eliminate the need for staying at home as much as possible, hand washing, and staying at least 6 feet away from others. Exercise is important, but walk in your neighborhood. You don't need to drive to take a walk. The weather is predicted to warm up this week, increasing the temptation to gather in our parks, but please don't do that. We all need to continue to physically distance. We need to stop the spread of this virus. It feels like forever that we've been sheltering in place, or at least it feels that way to me. But we need to use this as an opportunity to come together as one, caring for those who provide essential services and continuing to stay home while reaching out to those who may be alone and lonely. The inequities of our society, while previously recognized, have been highlighted during this epidemic, and we must commit to rebuild while looking through a much more equitable lens. And finally, let's not forget that Earth Day is celebrating its 50th anniversary on Wednesday. The city website has many online activities for you and your family to participate in. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Would any of the other council members wish to say anything at this time? I'm seeing no from the other council members, so we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is report on actions taken in closed session. There was no closed session during this meeting, so I'll move on to item 5, the consent calendar. We'll move the consent calendar as it is routine and will be enacted in one motion unless a member of the public or a council member wishes to pull an item for discussion. So do I have any council members who wish to pull an item for discussion? Vice Mayor.
5458.
Sorry, 54 and 58?
Yes.
Okay. One moment. 4 and 8. Okay. Any other council member? Seeing none, are any of the members of the public wishing to pull a consent item for discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I do have
Raise your hand.
a comment to be read for 5-4.
For 5-4, okay, that's been already pulled, so that will happen as we discuss that item. A reminder to raise your hand if you wish to pull an item for discussion. I'm not seeing any virtual hand raises among the attendees. Give it one more moment, and then I will bring it back to council for discussion first of item 5-4. Vice Mayor, what do you have?
Thank you. I think my question is that I support this parklet and I want to be sure that it happens. And I'm only a little concerned about the funding in this time of totally unprecedented shifting of monies. I just want to be sure that we actually are going to get the money from AC Transit. I understand that they fully intend to give it to us, but if they should happen to have a shortfall, I don't want us to be left without that funding.
Did staff have any comment about that?
Thank you, Mayor. At this point in time, we've confirmed with AC Transit that the funds remain committed. So we look forward to pursuing the project, and this MOU, including the terms and conditions within the MOU, explicitly state that AC Transit is committed. Should that change, we work in close communication with that agency, and we'll certainly let the council know.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Moss, I've unmuted you. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I had a question about 5.4. It wasn't clear to me as to who takes the responsibility for the maintenance of the parklet once this gets built. Is it the city? In the MOU, it says the city, AC Transit, and the Mr. Dewey's owner, although that's not very specific. Is it the city that will be responsible for keeping it clean, etc.? And what is, and I guess refresh my memory, what is our agreement with for the other parklets that have been built?
Okay. The parklet that is already constructed in front of As You Wish Frozen Yogurt is managed maintenance-wise by the property owner, the business owner there. It would be a similar arrangement for this new parklet with the business owner. The city certainly helps out and lends a hand when it comes to general maintenance or unique situations such as graffiti and that sort of thing, but general upkeep of the space, including the vegetation management and so on, is administered by the business owner.
Okay, thank you. I was curious because I noticed both of those are in front of food establishments, and presumably people go in to get yogurt or will go in to get the ice cream at Mr. Dewey's, and whether or not all that ends up in the trash cans, who knows? But it does seem they're getting a benefit, and I'm hoping they'll continue to step up for the maintenance part of it.
Thank you. I see that another member of staff has joined and has unmuted herself. Ms. Hirsch, did you have a comment?
I don't have a comment. I think Nicole answered the questions that were posed by the council.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments or questions from council members on 5.4? I will note that the bulb out or the parklet does contain what I've been told is the first bike corral, first off-street bike corral on the street, as well as all the other great amenities. Seeing no other I do have a question actually. So should we assume then is there a maintenance agreement in writing for the parklet, or that is yet to be done?
That's still to be completed.
Okay, thank you. I think it would be good to have such an agreement in place to make sure that we formally have the procedure in place for the maintenance, because we know that businesses turn over, and it's good to have something to follow once that happens. Okay, moving on to item 5.8. That was also an item that the Vice Mayor wished to be pulled. What do you have? You are still muted. Let's see. I've unmuted you. Oh, sorry. We were both trying to do it. I'll let you unmute yourself.
Thank you. To go back to 5.4, did the city clerk need to read a public comment on that or not?
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sorry about that. City Clerk.
Hello, City Council. Quite exciting that AC Transit has offered funding for the majority of the cost of building Albany's second bus stop parklet. Dreams of more space to enjoy cashew ice cream on the avenue in the future provides the kind of hope we need now. Albany Strollers and Roller is donating 2,500 to the Parklet's construction. ASNR has also arranged for 1,000 donation from Emerson Bolivaran / Bicycle Law. Together, these are almost 1/5 of the remaining funding needed. ASNR has also worked with its favorite rack manufacturer and the project architect to design this Parklet's bike parking, which will comprise Albany's first bike corral. The design is all Albany. It will have designated parking specifically for cargo bikes and bikes with trailers. It will have designated parking specifically for children's bike of all sizes, even the smallest. Thank you for approving moving the bus stop what seems like so many years ago in order to improve life for bus riders and drivers, reduce congestion on San Pablo for other motorists, and create the opportunity for Albany's second bus stop, Parklet. We look forward to when all can enjoy the Parklet and the current strange times have faded to a reminiscence for some and a sad memory for others. Preston Jordan for Albany Strollers and Rollers.
Thank you, City Clerk. And I think that'll conclude item 5.4. So on to item 5.8. Vice Mayor, you had a comment?
Yes, my comment isn't
Question?
particularly on the letter as such, but I didn't know where else to say this, so I stuck it into this part. It has occurred to me that things are moving very rapidly as far as legislation goes, especially on the federal level. And I think we're all getting letters from both the League of California Cities and the National League of Cities and probably other organizations wanting us to either support or oppose legislation where there's not always time to wait for a council meeting. We do have it in our policies that the mayor can send a letter and put it on the next agenda. And I just kind of wanted to highlight that should be, especially in these times where things are moving so rapidly, it should be more common practice than we probably like. You know, normally you don't like that kind of governance, but I think we just need to do it now probably more often. And I just kind of wanted to remind everybody that we have the ability to do that. And I think if any of us have legislation that we want to support or oppose, we need to get it to the mayor right away so he can do that. And I think it's also appropriate if we see something that we as individuals want to sign on to, that we do that also. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments on item 5.8?
I'll move consent.
Seeing none,
Am I muted?
thank you. Do we have a second? You'll have to unmute for a second, or we can maybe take Michael Barnes's finger point as a second. I'll allow it. So we have a motion and a second. Would the clerk do the roll call, please?
Councilmember Barnes? Yes. Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Nason?
I heard the mouth. Yes. There we go.
Vice Mayor McQuaid?
Yes.
Mayor Pilch?
Yes.
And the motion carries.
Thank you very much. Moving on to go to the city, public comment. This is the section of the meeting where we allow members of the public to comment on items that are not on the agenda. So if you have a comment on an item that is not on the agenda, this is your time to comment. Ordinarily, you will have 3 minutes to comment. I see we have one hand raised. Would the clerk like to, does the clerk have any other items for public comment as well?
Yes, I do. Would you like me to read first or have the speaker speak first?
Why don't we go ahead and let the speaker speak first, and then we'll go to the red items.
Okay, Jeremiah, you're up. Go ahead. My timer's going to start when you start speaking.
Hi, good evening, City Council members and also Albany community members and members of the public. I appreciate my 3 minutes. This council meeting, just to let everybody know, my name is Jeremiah Garrett Pinguello, and I'm a longshoreman at the Port of Oakland. I'm an ILWU longshoreman. I'm a registered member. I'm a B-man. I have health insurance through my work. I'm a longshoreman. I work every single day at the Port of Oakland. If you drive by Interstate 880 and you look to the side, you see all those big cranes, or by the Bay Bridge. I work there every single day. You all may wonder what goes on underneath those cranes or with inside those perimeter fences. Well, let me tell you what, it's just not COVID-19 that's gonna kill you out here. It's very dangerous. We had a unit member fall off the vessel a couple weeks ago. That made the news. What didn't make the news was our guy that got jumped in the water to help save his life. The moral of the story here is I'm in a type of situation where I have a career and I have a great job, but I do not have access to hot water or a shower. I have a YMCA membership, but YMCA is closed. If you research city council meetings 5 years ago, not only will you find that I suggested that the Albany pool has the facilities to have a shower program, but after that meeting, Beth and Jim in the back, when I first met them, came to me and said, "That's a great idea, Jeremiah." And a few months later, that shower program started. I have put countless effort in this city, and I love my community. I'm going to be here for the next 50 years to help build Albany, make it stronger. All I'm asking for is, how are you helping Jeremiah, an essential worker? How is the city helping? All I need is a shower. If a resident has a hot shower in their backyard, an outdoor shower, I'm willing to pay money to take a shower. I understand there's hotel rooms available for me to take a shower. It costs $70. Even though I'm working, I can't afford $70 a day. So I have not showered since March 9th. You can't see me, but I'll show you my hair right now. I've got dreadlocks, first time in my life. So if anybody out there can help me take a shower or know any resources that could help me out, please. That's all I'm asking. I've called Albany Cares. Seems like Albany doesn't care. I've got no response from them. I've called the resource, Albany Social Services. They suggest I go take a shower at Willard School in Berkeley with the homeless people. Okay, I'm not trying to catch COVID-19. I just want a clean, hot shower, please. That's all I'm asking.
Thank you for your comments. City Clerk, read items, please.
The next comment. Good evening, council member. I appreciate your service to the city of Albany during these challenging times. My name is Evelyn Shen. I'm a resident of Albany and a parent of 2 teenagers. I am also a member of Voter Choice Albany, a volunteer group advocating for ranked choice voting in Albany. As the executive director of Forward Together, a national organization that is committed to amplifying the voice of communities of color to their legislators and public representatives, I was very excited to see the level of support within our city to place ranked choice voting on the November ballot. As you may know, Voter Choice Albany has been collecting signature to place an initiative measure on the November 2020 ballot proposing to change the voting method used in Albany to ranked choice. We stopped the signature gathering campaign a few days before the County of Alameda's shelter-in-place order took effect, but we were well on our way to collecting the required signatures we needed to place this initiative on the ballot by early May. After seeing this high level of support, I respectfully asked the City Council to place the measure on the November ballot to represent the interests of Albany voters. The fact that we were able to collect signatures from over 600 Albany voters in just 1 month, and that roughly 70% of the voters asked to sign did so, are strong indicators that Albany voters wanted an opportunity to vote on this matter. I urge you to listen to the voters in Albany and place ranked choice voting on the ballot. And I have one more.
Go ahead.
Dear Albany Council members, my name is Reverend Deborah Lee. I am an Albany resident and parent and have been so for the past 15 years. Thank you for all the work that you do on a daily basis for our city and community. This past year, I have been a member and volunteer with Voter Choice Albany, a volunteer group advocating for ranked choice voting in Albany. For several weeks before shelter in place, I was part of the team of volunteers collecting signatures in my neighborhood for the ballot initiative to put ranked choice on the ballot here in Albany in November. It was a pleasure to knock on doors, talk with neighbors, and discuss how we can improve our voting system in Albany, making it more representative of our diverse community, especially racial, minority, and women. In an article in Yes Magazine, the impact of ranked choice voting cities in California is reported. A 2016 report by Fair Voters and Represent Women examining election through November 2016 show that since the introduction of ranked choice voting, women of color won 5% of all contests, compared with 14% before the system was adopted. Women's representation has increased in ranked choice voting cities, while it has dropped in cities using the older system during the period studied. Women and people of color together won 81% of all ranked choice elections, up from 67% of the same number of races before ranked choice. I think this is important for Albany, reflects the value and electorate with whom I spoke, who overwhelmingly support ranked choice voting and signed the petitions. We have had to stop collecting signatures due to the shelter-in-place order and public health risks. Over the course of 1 month, we gathered over 600 signatures. If we had continued gathering signature at this rate, we would have had 1,700 signatures by the signature gathering deadline of approximately early May, well over the required 1,200 needed to get on the ballot. Because we are unable to continue signature gathering, I respectfully ask the City Council to place the measure on the November ballot, something that City Council can do on its own. One very memorable conversation I had with a neighbor on whose door I knocked said, "Sure, I'll sign. Let's let the voter decide." I am asking you to do the same and allow the Albany voters decide. Thank you for your time in receiving this comment. Sincerely, Reverend Deborah Lee.
Does that complete the comments?
Yes.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the members of the public for those comments. And I don't believe there are any other comments, so I will move on to the next agenda item, which is the council subcommittee reports, reports on appointed representation, and reports on other meetings and events. And I'll try to be a little bit more systematic this time. Item 7.1 is City Council subcommittee reports. Are there any subcommittee reports this evening? Seeing none, I will note that I'm not surprised that there are no subcommittee reports given the situation with COVID-19, excuse me. But I think it's time to think about getting back on track with these reports and sticking to our quarterly, our promised quarterly update schedule. Moving on to item 7.2 is City Council regional bodies, where you're an appointed representative. Would anyone like to report on appointed representation meetings of where you're an appointed representative? I'm not seeing any reports. I have a few myself. One moment. I attended the Planning, Policy, and Legislation Committee meeting of the Alameda County Transportation Commission, and nothing to note to report out of there. And I believe that is it. There will be an East Bay Community Energy meeting on Wednesday evening, for which I'm getting a lot of correspondence. The item that was previously mentioned in a previous council meeting about nuclear energy will be on that meeting. And that's all I have for appointed representation. Is there any council member who would like to report on other meetings attended? Vice Mayor? Go ahead.
Continuing, as I'm sure we all are, looking at a variety of webinars on COVID-19 and related items. I did actually attend the Housing Authority meeting, but there's really nothing to report. We're in the process of searching for a new executive director, so that's taking a lot of our time. With the mayor, I attended the 2x2x2 and the mayor's conference. And this afternoon, I did listen to a webinar on the census, and I was pleased to note that Albany has the second highest response rate so far for the census, which was good to see.
Is that it? Yes, thank you. You may have something scratching on your microphone when you speak. Maybe it's a paper or something. Something to note for next time you speak. Any other council member wish to report on other meetings? Well, seeing none, thank you to the Vice Mayor for being better at remembering all the meetings. Indeed, the 2x2x2 and Mayor's Conference occurred, first virtual Mayor's Conference. And I attended, maybe the Vice Mayor mentioned this business resiliency meeting where she was also in attendance, and a few county elected county public health calls on the COVID-19 situation. And that is all I have to report. Any final call for any meetings attended? Seeing none, I'll move on to the city manager report. City manager?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to give you an update on city status in responding to COVID-19. Our public works crews have actually taken this initiative with reduced traffic around town to get some work accomplished. The past 2 weeks, they've been out filling potholes and repainting curbs and clearing tree wells along Solano Avenue. The city's graffiti contractor, along with city staff, have increased efforts along Solano in response to an uptick in tagging graffiti. Sewer cleaning and inspection work is scheduled to begin next Monday, April 27th. Again, this is mandated work by the EPA and our consent decree. The work will focus on the northeastern section of the city, and the work is scheduled to be completed by the end of May. A larger potholing contract is scheduled to begin the week of May 4th. Similar to last year, the contractor will focus on potholes that are too large or deteriorated for city staff to complete, and this work will be completed within the next 2 weeks. All of this work is essential activities and being done in conformance with social distancing requirements, including the wearing of masks. City staff, the city has purchased masks for all city employees in accordance with the county order. Additionally, in our human services and programs, since March 16th, the Senior Center continues to be extremely busy. We've answered 1,237 phone calls, about 1,400 meals have been delivered, about 150 bags of groceries, and 16 deliveries of essential items. So again, I applaud that staff for continuing to do that really high energy work, and they're doing a fantastic job. Really, all city staff have grown accustomed to a new way of doing business and ensuring the continuity of our city. So I applaud all departments in how they're handling this situation. Also, you will see that we continue to have a robust public outreach and interface. We've updated our website as it continues to be a hub of information for the community. And we've really utilized what the council's actually stated in terms of the difference between physical distancing and social distancing, ensuring that that's a physical distance, but we continue to support one another remotely. You'll see a definite uptick in our social media presence as well. As the Vice Mayor mentioned, we will be having a virtual Earth Day, and something that I'd like to take a moment to recognize the council for. As you prepare videos for our community, please watch for those. They're fantastic. We have 2 so far from the Vice Mayor and Council Member Peter Moss. They're really a joy to watch. So thank you for taking the time to do those. I know it's strange to talk into your phone or whatever your device you're using, but really enjoyed watching those. That's it. Thank you.
Councilmember Nason, looks like you have a question.
Yeah, actually, I'd just like to give a shout out to the staff for the excellent work in keeping our waterfront open. A lot of people are getting their outdoor activity down there and doing, I think, an absolutely great job of maintaining social distancing in general. Lapses seem to be rare, and the folks who pick up trash down there are super grateful that the city is continuing to service the cans and things, and letting us continue to park and enjoy that really vital resource. It's appreciated, and it's a great job.
Thank you. Were there any other questions from council members? Seeing none, thank you for the report, City Manager. And we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the presentation of our annual financial statements and annual audit for fiscal year 2018-2019. This is the fiscal year that ended in June 30th, 2019. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. Thank you. And I see we have our Finance Director, Heather Rowden, with us. And staff, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. We have both our Finance Director, Heather Rowden, as well as our Auditor, Sheldon Chavon, on. Perfect, there he is. So I am going to turn it over to them, but I wanted to first take a moment to really pause and underscore the importance of the document that you're receiving. Yes, this is a standard document that most cities adopt each year. However, as you've experienced with me, the last couple of years have been a challenge for our finance department and our city to ensure that we get our finance and accounting in order and in a presentable format to the community. And I am extremely proud of the work that Heather's done with her department to really move mountains in that department and set policy and lead her team through just a phenomenal change in that department. So with that, I will turn it over to Heather and Sheldon to walk you through this particular audit.
So I think Sheldon's going to start and kind of go over everything, and then I'll follow up with the findings and what we're doing to address those. Oop. Sheldon, I don't think we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, perfect. All right, well, earlier I was having video problems. Now Now I'm having audio problems and an echo. Okay. If things get weird, someone please say something. I'm going to go ahead and move forward with this. And I'm going to share my screen if I can. I'm not sure. Yes, I can. Perfect. All right. And so there's a presentation coming forward here in a second. And this is the first time I've done this. Although I've done multiple Zoom meetings, I've not had to share my presentations with a public forum like this before. So here we go. Okay, everybody should see a PowerPoint. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, let's see what it is. City of Albany, June 30, 2019 audit results. All right, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to go over a little bit of an overview of the reporting package itself. I think it's important to do this because the last couple of years, as you know, you had a disclaimer of opinion on your audited financials. And, you know, the one thing to say right off the top before I get into this is, you know, I was happy to be a part of the solution this year to get you guys going in the right step forward into the right direction. So here I am to present the audit reporting package. Now, typically under governmental accounting standards, and keep in mind it's GASB, you'll hear me refer to GASB multiple times, and it's Governmental Accounting Standards Board. So typically the requirement is that you have a management discussion and analysis. We refer to that as the MD&A for short. And then behind that MD&A, you have government-wide financial statements. And included in the government-wide financial statements is something called the Statement of Net Position and the Statement of Activities. That's a balance sheet and an income statement. Behind the government-wide financials, you have fund financial statements. It's a funny presentation. A lot of people have a hard time with this, but effectively what you have is two different sets of financial statements included in one reporting package. And so the fund financial statements are on a different accounting basis than your government-wide. But effectively, it's two balance sheets and two income statements, right? The best way to think of it is you have your detailed funds, which you're used to seeing throughout the year, you're used to seeing with your budgets, you're used to discussing fund balance. That's where you find that information. That's on a current presentation, right? No long-term assets, no long-term liabilities. That's for your fund financial statements. Well, that's rolled into and consolidated into the government-wide financial statements. And with the government-wide, we're including the long-term assets, such as capital assets, the long-term liabilities, such as any type of bonds that you might have issued, pensions, and other post-employment benefits. And of course, you know, GASB is full of accountants that like to make things more complicated than they need to. So we add some funny terminology in there that I'm not going to get into in detail unless somebody asks me to. But that funny terminology includes deferred inflows of resources and deferred outflows of resources. Think of a deferred outflow similar to another type of asset. Think of a deferred inflow of resources as similar to another type of liability, like unearned revenue. So the bottom line is once we have these financial statements, we have to support those, and we support those with notes to the financial statements. And then you have required supplementary information, and here's the key part, other than the MD&A, right? So that brings up one key question. Well, what is the MD&A exactly? Well, the MD&A is actually required supplementary information, right? It is not a required financial statement. It is not supplementary information, it's required supplementary information, as well as things such as your general fund budget to actual schedule. That's an example of another required supplementary information. The difference being is that the GASB, when they came out with statement number 34, decided that they wanted to put the MD&A in the front of the audit reporting package. Whereas the other schedules, such as your budget to actuals for your general fund and your pension schedules and your OPEB schedules, other post-employment benefits, those you'll find behind the notes to financial statements. They're buried. All right, so there's one other required component, and it's called the supplementary information section, which you heard me mention before, the supplementary information section, not required, but supplementary. So this is another section that supports your fund financial statements, right? It's your combining special revenue funds, your capital projects funds, your debt service funds. It's the detail of those funds combined to roll into your fund financial statements. Now, it's very important to note that the management's discussion and analysis is actually not an audited part of the report. It's unaudited information, similar to the required supplementary information. The budget information we include in the report is technically unaudited. We don't issue an opinion on budgetary information. We don't issue an opinion on the information included in the management's discussion and analysis. Technically, we actually audit the information included in the management's discussion analysis because it comes directly from the government-wide financials and the fund financials, which is audited and we issue an opinion on. However, the standards require that we say it's unaudited, right? So it's a very interesting dynamic when you put this reporting package together that includes both unaudited and audited information. And so in essence, what we ended up with this year, and as you'll see as we move forward, is an annual financial report that does not include the management's discussion and analysis. And this was because, at my recommendation to the city, I felt that the prior 2 years having been disclaimers would make the MD&A completely non-beneficial. It would just not have value to the city or to its readers because the prior data for 2018 just really wasn't reliable. And so from my standpoint, to take an audited financial statements with very good numbers in it that I felt with a 90% confidence level are accurate, no material misstatements, and compare that to something where there's absolutely no assurance, it just didn't make sense to me. So I recommended to management that you do not include an MD&A because it's not actually an audited section. Although it's required supplementary information, it has almost no impact on the financials in the sense of how it impacts the city as an organization from the sense of bond ratings. It doesn't have a financial impact on you. What does happen is two things. One is I have to issue, in the opinion letter that I supply with the report, there's actually two. One of them relates directly to this overview of the reporting package. And there's an extra paragraph in there called an other matter paragraph where we say that that management did not include the management's discussion analysis as required by governmental accounting standards. However, it did not impact our opinion on the financial statements. And that's basically, in a summary, what we say in that paragraph. So that's the gist of it. And so really in the end, the extra cost it would take to go back and issue a management discussion analysis that would have comparative information that added value, it would have been fairly high because you're really looking at two possibilities. One is you re-audit the prior years to give you valuable information, which would cost an entire audit season. It's relatively expensive. Or you provide information that's unaudited and try to explain it. And so I made a recommendation to management, and they followed that recommendation to exclude the MD&A because the costs were minimal compared to the cost exceeded the benefits. To include the MD&A in the reporting package. Now, the other part of this you want to keep in mind too is that there's the terminology out there. You have comprehensive annual financial report, and then you have annual financial report or basic financial statements. The comprehensive annual financial report is required when you apply for the GFOA certificate, GFOA being the Government Finance Officers Association. Would not have made that deadline this year based on the things that happened during the audit. So the timeline was pushed back a few times, trying to get those beginning balances correct and reconciling those beginning balances. And ultimately, between us as your auditor and the city, we were able to get those beginning balances restated, adjusted, but we didn't have to reissue prior years. But in doing so, it took extra effort, took extra time. And so we would have not made that GFOA deadline. Even if we would have requested an extension, we would not have made that deadline. So the comprehensive annual financial report also includes a section called the statistical data section. And that is also an unaudited section. And it is not required by governmental accounting standards. So you won't find that in this report. What this report includes is the comprehensive, quote unquote, required pieces related to an audit. The government-wide financial statements, the fund financial statements, the note disclosures, the required supplementary information other than the MD&A, and then the supplementary combining schedules. So this is actually what is required by GASB, except for the MD&A, and the MD&A has never had a negative impact on a city or local government audit when it's been omitted in my 20 years, well, at least since GASB 34 came around. I've never seen it have a negative impact. All right, we can move on. That was long-winded there. Government-wide statement of net position. So we're going to go into a little bit of the numbers, but I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. I will say this, we're going to get into the audit results later, but I want to make it clear now that you actually have an unqualified opinion on these financial statements. That's good. That means you passed the audit in the sense of the financial statements, that the numbers are reliable. They're not materially misstated with a certain level of confidence and assurance. And in the past, you had a disclaimer. The auditor just said, no, we're not even going to bother. And they said, here's some financial numbers, but we don't know what they mean. We are providing a certain level of confidence that these financial statements are not materially misstated. All right, so you can see here, as of June 30, 2019, this is your consolidated government-wide financial statement, your balance sheet, your statement of net position. And you can see you had total assets of $119 million when you combine the two types of activities, governmental activities and business type. And of course, the business type is your sewer fund. The bottom, the one thing you want to pay attention to in this slide would be that the net position, your total net position is $51.5 million, including both governmental and sewer activities. And it's interesting how the flow works in this, and that when you see net investment in capital assets of 54 million, you get into unrestricted net position. That's a deficit. It gets really confusing. What does that mean long-term wise? Well, it just means that you have pension liabilities and other post-employment benefit liabilities and things that are going to take you out 20 to 30 years that you have to account for at some point in time. So what I typically tell people, or tell cities and boards and whatnot when I'm doing presentations, is the important thing is to have a positive total net position. If you find yourself in a deficit net position overall, then you have concerns. But as of June 30, 2019, showing 51 million and 24 million in the governmental activities as a total positive net position from a government perspective, I have no concerns here. I think it's actually a good position to be in. Now, if you guys want me to speed up, let me know. I can do that. Statement of activities. This is your government-wide income statement. So it's going to show you things such as charges for services, operating grants, capital grants, taxes. Now, there's going to be a chart in the next page that's going to show you some comparatives based on the categories, not prior year. And the one thing to note on this page is the prior period adjustments. So you see from the third line from the bottom, it says net position end of the year. Then it says net position beginning of the year. Then it says prior period adjustments. So you're going to see a total prior period adjustment of $10.6 million. So this is what, you know, the city had to do and we had to do as your auditors to make the current June 30, 2019 financial statements auditable. We had to go back with the help of Mays and the city and reconcile these beginning fund balances to make sure that the ending fund balances were accurate. And these are the adjustments we came up with. And a lot of this is capital assets. There's some debt adjustments in there, quite a few adjustments to get the beginning balances correct. So here's a quick chart, bar graph that shows you the governmental activities revenue. So you can see by far taxes, largest bar that you can see, capital grants, charges for services come in second and third. And of course, next year we'll show comparatives on this, and that'll have more meaning. So this is where I get into what does it really mean. It's hard to have meaning if you don't have something to compare it to, right? Total expenses by function. So you can actually see where your money went from the by program or by program service level. We call it function in the annual financial report. So you can see general government and police lead the way, then your fire and EMS, community development, environmental services, recreation, and community services. Of course, you have got a little bit of interest expense throughout the year as well. So the bar graphs kind of tell the story there. Now here's the fun stuff, pensions, right? So this is a big part of why a lot of cities find themselves in a deficit net position in the government wide. So these net pension liabilities don't have an immediate impact on your fund balance. They end up having an impact on your fund balance eventually because it impacts your annual required contribution. And so your annual required contributions, obviously, it's going to tell you what you have to contribute year in and year out, and therefore that's going to impact your budget and ultimately your fund balance. So looking at these numbers here give you an idea over the long term where you might end up contribution-wise every year. However, they're moving targets, they're estimates. You have discounts, you have assumptions, and rates of returns and things of that in these actuarial reports that change these numbers. It's been fairly consistent the last year or 2 years for CalPERS, but you also have that police and fire relief fund, which you actually have some money put aside for that in a trust. But this slide here gives you an idea, or an exact idea, I would say, considering that they're estimates. I don't know if you can say exact, but your net pension liabilities, that first column that has dollar values, $35.8 million in net pension liabilities. Deferred outflows and deferred inflows, you can kind of ignore. That gets complex, but again, deferred outflows are similar to an asset. Deferred inflows similar to a liability. That's basically where they adjust things in and out for those assumptions, differences, and discount rate differences. The pension expense is the actual pension expense reported in your income statement for the government-wide presentation, not your funds, mind you. The funds are specific to the annual required contribution. Your government-wide, the pension expense, that's the number that we reported there, and it's a different number than you'll find in your fund statements. Miss and safety pension. So this is CalPERS, just to really call out 2019, the pension liability for risk and safety plans in CalPERS was 27.8 million. Go back to 2015, it was 16.4. So you can see that increase quite a bit. That's very consistent with other cities in this cost sharing plan.
There was also a change in 2016. The JPA management group was brought from a different plan into these cities' plans. So that's why there was a large change between 16 and 17.
Yeah, that has happened a few times. I've seen a few clients where they've had these bump ups related to that. I've also seen other interesting things happen, but I don't want to get on a tangent. So plugs and spreadsheets, but CalPERS has been known for that. Police and fire pension trust. So this is your pension and trust fund. And the reason I present this is that you actually have money put aside into this. This is closed, no new participants in this. And this is actually has a separate audit report coming. But it's important to see that you actually have a planned fiduciary net position here. It's a little bit different presentation than the cost sharing plans. And so I wanted to show you that you can see the total pension liability of 13.38 million. You can see the total planned fiduciary net position. So that shows that you have some assets put aside against that $13.38 million liability. So in that sense, it's you're ahead of the game on a lot of cities when it comes to pensions. Of course, it is a closed pension fund. But now, one thing I will say is that most cities have more control over the other post-employment benefits than they do with CalPERS, and so they're putting more money towards those benefits than the CalPERS. Here's your other post-employment benefits, and this is gives you a comparative at 18 and 19. So total OPEB liability at June 30, 2019 was 3.7. There was an adjustment related to this in the audit as well. In prior years, for whatever reason, the city had been reporting the OPEB liability. The reporting date was the same as the valuation report measurement date, and that can be, but it's not common. It's most cities are a year ahead of the measurement date, and to be consistent, we went ahead and made that adjustment this year. So I'm kind of going through this quickly because I don't want to take too much of your time with things that you might have questions about. And really the most important thing, and was covering the overview of the financials to help you kind of understand what you're looking at. And then secondly, to give you the results of the audit, because that's what I'm here for. And so the results, no exceptions in the audit opinions. That's the first thing. So that means you passed the audit. So congratulations to the city. It took a while, but you got it done. Material weaknesses noted in findings and responses section. So in this audit reporting package, there is a findings and reporting section. We decided to include it all in one package, which you can do. We issued a second opinion because this audit was done under two standards, one being the standards accepted in the United States of America, The second being generally accepted governmental auditing standards. Under the general accepted governmental auditing standards, we issued a second opinion in the back of the report, and behind that opinion will actually reference to the findings and responses section, which is behind that opinion. And you'll see in there a summary of material weaknesses and a summary of significant deficiencies. The opinion letter, the generally accepted governmental accounting standards opinion letter, separately identifies which are material weaknesses and which those findings are significant deficiencies. So there are some significant deficiencies in there too. So I think it's actually 2, 3, and it's actually 3, 4, and 5, I believe, that are significant deficiencies, and then 1, 2, and 8 and 9 are material weaknesses, I believe. And Heather's going to get into those a little bit more. No significant pass on adjustment. So we did have material weaknesses, which means we had material audit adjustments. We actually had quite a few client provider adjustments as well, which means that we're working with the city on reconciliations and identifying correct balances, and therefore getting to a point to where we agreed on a number, so that those are client provided adjustments. A pass on adjustment is something where we had a difference, but it wasn't significant enough for us to adjust it in the audit. Or it was so insignificant that we didn't classify it as a significant passed on adjustment. And we did not have any passed on adjustments that we felt were significant. No disagreements with management. It's always good. So the most significant estimates would obviously be pensions and OPEB, right? Those are moving targets. Discounts go up or down, it's going to change your liability. Actuarial reports, you change some of the investment returns, and it's going to change your liability. So those are the most significant estimates. You can also say depreciation is capital assets. It's a very simple calculation, depreciation, but it's actually one of the largest balances in there. Accumulated depreciation, it's a very large estimate, even though it's a very simple estimate. Most significant disclosures, no surprise, right? Oh, I'm missing a comma. Cash, debt, pensions, and OPEB, right? So largest balance is actually cash and investments, your LAIF balances, and then of course debt, and then pensions, $35 million or so, and then the other post-employment benefits is most significant disclosure. So what does this all mean? Let's see. In the end, even though we have findings, even though we have some material weaknesses and significant deficiencies, it's a huge step in the right direction, because what we have is a report that has an unqualified opinion in it on the financial statements, whereas the last 2 years you had a disclaimer. So for me, I applaud the city working hard to get this done, and at the same time developing and improving internal controls. And that's what this next section is about when we get into the findings, is helping the city to improve on those inefficiencies and areas of controls that needed improvement. So what you get when you effectively pass the audit, even though you have some material weaknesses and significant deficiencies, you get one of these from me. Ready? Conclusion is, all right, stamp of approval. So that's it. That's my presentation on the annual financial report. I apologize if it's a little long-winded, but there's a lot to discuss and go over. So Heather, feel free to take it from there.
So do the counselors have any specific questions on the financials for Sheldon, or do we want me to just start going over the findings and how the city's been addressing them?
Council members? Yes, the Vice Mayor, please.
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
I lost my screen, but that's okay. I just want to be sure that I understand the fund balance or the reserve. And I understand, Heather, that there's going to be you're going to ask us about transferring some funds.
Mm-hmm.
But assuming that we do that, does that put us a bit over 6 million into the reserve, which meets the 25% criteria?
Yes.
Somehow kind of right?
Yes, assuming that we move the internal service funds from internal service funds to back into the general fund, which we've talked to the auditor about and are planning on presenting next council meeting, we would meet that 25%.
Okay, and that's at about 6 million.
About, yep.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Any other questions
I have a
before Heather
question.
continues?
Heather, can you hear me?
Please go ahead.
I can.
today in our discussion, you mentioned that we have a deficit of, I believe, $815,000. Is that correct?
The current budget is operating at a deficit. Yes.
Okay, if I was looking through the staff report and I believe I did see that number, but it was on the balance sheet, not the, revenues and expenditures. But in any case, in your presentation, if you come up with a line item that says where that deficit is, please point it out to me.
I do not have that in my presentation. So it would be a current deficit is is not included in the unrestricted general fund balance, like the budgeted deficit.
Oh, so that was, okay, I got you. But it was in the staff report somewhere. I saw it in the staff report.
Yes, I did. In the staff report, I mentioned that we had, yes, I did do that. I reduced the total fund balance by the amount that, Sheldon, did you include the budgeted deficit in the unrestricted fund balance, or was that included as restricted?
The budgeted deficit for 2020?
Correct.
Yeah, no, you won't find anything to do with the budgeted deficit in the annual financial report.
Right. So you'd have to take that total fund balance and reduce it by the 800 and some odd $1,000 to
Yeah,
get
so
the remaining.
if I may, Heather, maybe I can help out on that. It's and you have the right ideas. If you're looking at a deficit for 2020, it sounds like it's a 1-year deficit. It's not something where you're going to use up all your fund balance by 815,000. So you're going to be about a $2.45 million fund balance at the end of 2020 if that deficit holds true.
Correct. I don't anticipate that deficit holding true, but that is what was budgeted.
Okay, well, I'm fine. If at the end of this I have any more questions, I'll just ask you later.
Okay.
But I get the basic concept that sort of balance sheets are not the same thing as budgets. But that's sort of what you're telling me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That would be too complicated.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know. Yeah. It's
Thank
late
you.
in the evening.
Any other?
It's simple. Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah.
I'm going to mute myself.
Thank you. Any other council members have questions before Heather continues?
Okay. So Sheldon, I think if you want to stop sharing, I'll take over and I'll share my presentation.
You got it.
What am I sharing? Where'd it go? This thing. Okay. So there we go. So we had findings, and I'm just going to go through each finding individually and explain what the city is doing to address the particular finding. So the first finding was a material weakness, and it's related to our capital assets and debt. The capital assets had not been physically inventoried for a long time. And so we actually in February had a consultant come out and do a physical inventory of the city's assets. They're in the process of putting that report together. And so this finding should go away next year. We'll have everything put together. And that information will be uploaded into the city's financial system. And that way we can more accurately keep track in real time when we purchase assets, when we do maintenance to assets, and it'll help the city in making sure that this doesn't happen again. So that one should go away. We've already done that inventory. And then the second finding was our financial reporting and closing. So because of all of the adjustments that needed to be done, and because there was staff turnover and staff were still getting used to the accounting system, we didn't close in a timely fashion, and there were a handful of adjustments that the auditor needed to help us with. So what we plan on doing is, and Sheldon's team has already reached out to me to schedule the 2020 audit already. So we are working with both the auditor and the software company. We're gonna, during the interim audit work, we're gonna work and, you know, kind of go over what adjustments they're looking for and what we really need to make sure we're on top of, and we're gonna write it all down and put together procedures. And then when we go to do our fiscal close, we're going to bring out software company, and assuming we can get into the office again, and they're gonna help us walk through closing the fiscal year in the system. And we, again, will write it down and put together a complete procedure so that it's all documented and we don't have this issue going forward. Next was cash reconciliations. So the city had been reconciling the main bank account, but there were a number of issues with our payroll bank account. The city has like 7 bank accounts. And so the payroll bank account, we had to do a number of adjustments to, and I had started to go through those adjustments, but they were not completed by the time the auditor came in to do their work. We are doing those monthly now. So we are all up to date with those. We've gone through the AP bank account as well, and we're clearing all the checks on a monthly basis. So we are all caught up with all of our cash reconciliations. Our long-term debt, there were a handful of debt issuances in 2015, 16, 17. They had to do with refunding some older bonds, and then they also had to do with the public works building. And in the staff transition and due to a slight miscommunication between the treasurer and the finance department, there were some of the debt wasn't being tracked appropriately. So we had to do a lot of work with making sure that we had records of all the debt and that it was all being put in the financial system correctly, and we had our long-term debt schedule. And we are all up to date with that, and so we shouldn't have a problem again. And grant tracking. So the city has a handful of grants, and grants all come to before the city council in order to be approved before we accept grant money. But the finance department didn't have a way to track all the city's grants. This was being done by the individual departments, and the finance department didn't really have a big role in this. We are now, the individual departments are reaching out when they know that they're going to be applying for a grant. One, to help make sure that I can track if there's any, matching funds that need to be used, but also so that I know that I need to start looking out for this. We are monitoring all of the council agendas to know when grants come up. And we are also going to be bringing the software company in to go over their project accounting and their project module and their grant module, so that we can track these in the financial system, which will help both the individual departments when they don't need to keep their own records. They can help maintain it in the financial system, and it'll help the finance department really manage these funds, make sure that we're using the money appropriately, make sure that it's coded to the right place, all of that. Disbursements. There was 3 things. One was a credit card transaction. Each card holder has a different limit. It's based on an administrative policy that we have. And there was one instance that the auditors found where I think it was like $1,000, it was just over $1,000. And instead of getting, someone else who had a higher limit and, the authority to make that purchase, or getting a purchase order, they swiped their card twice in 2 different transactions. That person obviously has been spoken with, and everyone has to sign a cardholder agreement acknowledging that they do have limits and they shouldn't be going over them. There was an issue with missing receipt forms. This is actually something that I started focusing on, you know, within the first months of coming into Albany and going through our procedures and looking through staff's work. We now make sure that for both reimbursements and for credit card transactions, all those missing receipt forms, first of all, we have them. And second of all, they're all signed by the department head. Because the department head needs to be aware, and we also need to be aware when a receipt is missing, because we asked for detailed receipts and to make sure that the city's money is being spent appropriately. The last one was the city doesn't stamp invoices, so to know when they were received versus when they're paid. This came up because there were a handful of public works invoices that were paid over 90 days. And when I reached out to the public works director, this was because we were either disputing something on the invoice or we had an issue with, you know, one of the, like some of the work that was done. And so they hadn't been paid yet. But the finance department really needs to be able to keep track of that and make sure that we stay on top of those. So we are stamping invoices. Cash receipts, daily cash count reports. So when recreation brings money to the finance department, they weren't signing to confirm that they had received the amount that rec said that they had brought. So that's been added to the procedures for the accounts receivable technician. Then RecTrack, which is the system that recreation uses, that system has its own back-end accounting. And unfortunately, that system hasn't been maintained by an accountant. So there were issues between reconciling the accounting reports in RecTrack with the accounting reports in Munis, which is our financial system. And so we've done a lot of work to make sure that we have confidence in what's in both systems, and we have plans for the finance department to be more involved in RecTrack going forward. And then checks, which we deposit electronically, were not being stamped for deposit only when they were received, and we do that now. Internal service funds. This is what Peggy had asked about earlier with the funds that were going to be moved from internal service funds back into the general fund. For a number of years, the city has had funds for both insurance claims and compensated absences, and they had reserved them separately from our general fund reserve balance. And they weren't being maintained properly. We weren't putting money in on a regular basis, and we weren't recording expenses in them. Due to staff transition and the financial system change, the policies associated with them were misplaced and they weren't being used. So we do plan, like I said earlier, to bring forward something to council requesting that those funds be closed. And we did speak with the auditor about this, and he's on board, that these funds be closed and moved back into the general fund. And that's it. So does anyone have questions on specific findings or anything like that? Peggy?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I just sort of have a side question as far as the recreation software that doesn't seem to line up really easily with Munis. Does Munis have a module for like recreation registration?
Munis does not. In theory, Tyler has another product that should interface with Munis, but it's not it doesn't work for what recreation is looking for. So recreation looked at that product and decided that rec track is, you know, is much better for what they are looking for.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I can't see everyone else. So Heather, the obvious question is, going back to the start of the fiscal year, which is, you know, 7/1/2019, can we retroactively fix all these things going back to the start of the fiscal year, or have they been fixed? I just want to make sure that, you know, I think you've done an impressive job fixing all this stuff, but I'm going forward from today, or even going forward from the start of the fiscal year, are these fixed? Are all the buckets all set up, and is everything working as you've described?
Most of them have been, yes. Most of them were addressed by the end of fiscal year 19, but because the auditors were just looking at fiscal year 19, like, so for example, I said that with the missing receipts and the missing signature from the department heads, that's something that I addressed in 19. We looked at a timeline. I came in a month and a half into fiscal year 19. So a month and a half had already gone by. It took me some time to really review policies and make sure things were going correctly. And so, you know, by the time the end of fiscal year 19 had come, I had already made some significant changes, but when the auditors sampled their work throughout fiscal year 19, the things that they sampled hadn't been fixed yet. So a lot of these things have been fixed, but I mean, that's the whole point of an audit. Is I was looking, I was ready for them to say, oh, this is another thing that you really should be doing. So we are working as hard as we can to address these as quickly as possible. Some of them are going to take a little while, like the grant tracking. I have to schedule a time for the software people to come out and actually train staff on that module. And we have to get it all set up. The asset inventory, you know, the auditor who had done all of the work talked to me about that before fiscal year 19 even ended and said, you know, you really need to do this. And I said, well, we have plans on having a physical inventory done. He said, can you get it done by the end of fiscal year 19? And I was like, that's a week away. Probably not. We had to go out to bid, and, you know, so some of these things take a lot more time to implement and actually schedule than is ideal, but we're doing everything that we can to get them done as quickly as possible.
Okay, so we've got what? May, June. We really only have 2.5 months until the next fiscal close, right?
But so again, like I said, I have already addressed most of these items.
Right. So that's my question. So we're going to sort of start with a clean deck at the end of this fiscal year.
That's
all this.
The idea.
Okay, that's good. That's all I had.
Thank you. Other council members? Seeing no other council members with questions, I will open it up to the public. I do not see any public with hands raised yet. So do we have any submitted items, City Clerk?
No, we don't.
Okay, nothing submitted. No hands raised from the attendees of the public. Going once, going twice. I will bring it then back to the council for discussion. Would anyone like to go first? Councilmember Nason.
Can't unmute. Okay.
There you go.
Hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. I sent around a memo on an issue that concerns me, you know, and I'll start by saying this is amazing and wonderful progress. It really is. fantastic to see. But I do have a concern that in the absence of a CAFR, we have no narrative to provide to the public. We're not receiving one ourselves, and we are not able to transmit one out to anybody in the public who might be interested in understanding the city's current financials, because our most recent CAFR is for the year ended in June 30th, 2016, and we're not going to have another one until we have something for June 30th, the year ending June 30th, 2020, and that will not be until the end of the calendar year. So with, some 4 years elapsing between the preparation of those narrative reports, I think we should think about trying to create a narrative. And I do understand, I met at length with our auditor and with Heather and with Nicole this morning, and was persuaded that they have made the right call in not trying to do a CAFR, although it's theoretically possible. It would be expensive and have very little benefit. Even now, a CAFR would be pretty stale. We're in the fourth quarter of the following fiscal year, so a comparison of the two preceding fiscal years would be out of date in any case. But the CAFR is, and the MD&A, and I'm not disagreeing with our auditor by any means, but I've read the MD&As that have been produced while I've been on the council, and I've read MD&As for organizations on which I've served as on the board, and I've been involved in preparing the MD&A for organizations for which I've served as executive director. And I think there is more, and I just encourage everybody to go back and look at the MD&A for 2016. It's more than a comparison of the two fiscal years. There's quite a bit more to it. And I think it's important that we do provide a narrative bridging the last information that we provided to the public, ending in 2016, and our current financial situation. We have promised CAFRs. We unavoidably were not able to deliver, but I think that we should deliver as best we can an interpretation of our finances that will be intelligible, that we can all understand, and that the public can understand. Because just getting these numbers, I could come in with 1,000 questions. You just don't even know where to start. And that is what, to me, the MD&A does, or some kind of functional equivalent, kind of tells you where to begin, draws your attention to what is most important, what is most potentially concerning versus, maybe what's not concerning. And I think it would be, honestly, I think we kind of owe it to the public. So that's my my suggestion to the rest of the council, that we consider that.
Thank you, council member. Anyone else with comments? If no one else has a comment, I'll at this point I'll opine my own. I am very grateful to the staff that we're at where we're at now. that we've corrected deficiencies, that we've finally been able to produce a financial report again, and that we're on the road to producing a CAFR. And I breathe a great sigh of relief for that. I'll note that it was the auditor's recommendation that we don't do MD&A and therefore don't have a CAFR, although it did strike me as strange that the MD&A is a required document, and yet we're not producing the required document. But I do understand and agree with the reasoning for that. I think the council member has a point. When I think back, I know the narrative because I've been through it. We've all been through it here with a software upgrade that was very problematic or very difficult in any case for a number of reasons. And we had a number of staff turnovers and non-continuity in our staff in the finance department, at least, that likely contributed to this situation. So I know that narrative, but I think the council member has a point that the public, unless they watch this meeting and the other meetings previous to this where we discussed it, would not be able to get that from just picking up the annual financial report as presented in this meeting. So it may be a very good compromise to ask with as little effort as possible, because I know the staff is doing a lot right now, and maybe not force a too tight a deadline, but to ask the staff to produce a narrative so that anyone looking at this financial report can understand how we got here and why there weren't financial reports previous to this, and why, well, I think the report actually does go into why we're not having the MD&A, but to as briefly as possible describe the narrative. I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea. And I'll stop there and see if anyone else wants to weigh in on that. Yes, Vice Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And like the other council members, I want to add my thanks to Heather. We're lucky that we found you when we did. You've just done an incredible job of getting us from the basement of the financial world to where we are today, which is in a very good place. And Nicole, you and your staff also need some thanks on this. I know you've worked really, really hard on it the last couple of years. When I read all of the narratives in this financial report, it seems to me that it's fairly clear that there were issues with the software, there were issues with staff turnover, and I'm not sure what else we need to add that isn't already in the narrative. I'd be interested if the auditor would like to address that. And, you know, I think when I look at financial reports, you know, one of the things that's really important, if there were deficiencies, what were they and what are we doing to fix them? And I think that's really been clearly delineated in that report. And I think that would be something the public is interested in, and it's there. We don't need to do it again. It's there quite clearly. I know I'm showing my papers again. You know, the fact that we got all the reports to the agencies that we needed to on time is huge. And the fact we have an unmodified opinion is huge. And that, again, I think that's the important piece. And I think that's what people want to know. So I don't really see any reason to do anything else. I think we can accept this, we can accept and file it, and look forward to even better times coming. I think staff, you know, in the world of disaster, which is where we are, there's a huge accounting piece and a huge piece figuring out how we reimburse for some of these costs that we're both incurring and money we're losing. And that's where Heather needs to be putting her attention right now. And I'd like rather see that be her emphasis. And I think we're still trying to hire somebody in that department, and there's a lot of work to close out the books. And it seems like that's where the emphasis needs to be, not in going back and basically reiterating what I believe is in this report. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. Councilmember Moss, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick comment. I agree with everything that's been said about this report. There does, from my limited accounting challenged perspective, there does seem to have been some progress made. But the one comment I wanted to put is, when there's a presentation, it would be great to see that presentation before. I know all those numbers are in the report, but when you get it specific like that, I'd love to see that before the council meeting. It's just a lot easier for me, who, like I say, I think is accounting challenged, to be able to follow this. And because, trying to reference exactly where it is in the staff report, in the actual financial report, becomes a challenge. I have to say, for my own, even though I know this is an important aspect of government, it's something we do every year, something I've done for the last 7 or 8 years that I've been on the council. Looking forward into the budgetary aspects side of the whole financial situation, I think will be the potentially more interesting discussion as we go forward, particularly when I look at the amount of income we get from taxes and where that tax revenue is likely to go in light of what's going on the planet. But otherwise, I do appreciate what Heather and the finance department's been able to do to make this, up to the standards that we need to get up to. So, my 2 cents.
Thank you. I saw Councilmember Barnes' hand up as well. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I'm unmuted. I pretty much agree. My main concern is that we put all these changes to bed so that we have it's like those runners on the track. They have those little stands they put their feet in at the beginning of the 100-yard dash. We need this on a solid footing so that we can take off at the close of fiscal year and move forward quickly. I mean, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. That's an old joke, but so I'm concerned about spending too much time polishing up stuff that we've already done, given especially that, people aren't even in their offices. So I think we do have a staff report. I think the staff report is pretty legible. I'm kind of content with the staff report. I do think that, and given from the fact we didn't have any comments from our audience out there in the cloud, I think what people care about more, and I think Pete said this, is the budget. And I think we can look at this when it comes time to do the budget, maybe spiff things up at that time. But I'm sort of, let's stop, let's get ourselves in a good position so that we can put this all behind us and move forward quickly on July 1 of next year, at the fiscal close. I think Rochelle is right, but I think given the kind of situation we're in, the benefit cost analysis doesn't work for me for spending a lot more time on this. And that's my 2 cents worth.
Sure. Councilmember Nason, did you want to follow up?
Yeah, I wanted to clarify something. Vice Mayor McQuaid, when you're talking about the report, are you talking about the staff report, or are you talking about the notes to the financial statements, or what you were saying? It's in the report, and I just wanted to be sure. Or were you talking about the report that the auditor presented tonight, or all three taken together?
Well, I was actually referring to the annual financial report, but I think, and I'm sorry, I think it was Pete who mentioned the staff report, which is also quite comprehensive. So I think which also is posted to the web. So I think that we've covered our bases, but I was referring to the annual financial report.
So how would people feel if we posted the staff report with the financial report? So that if somebody gets on our website and they're interested in learning about our financials, they see the basic financial statements, that's a difficult document to read and pull information from. But if you have the staff report posted there with the financial report, at least they have a shot at getting some information that is a little bit more intelligible to the average person.
I'll say that I think Vice Mayor made some good points that some of the narrative is in there, or a lot of the narrative is in there, including the findings, which are quite significant and are right there in the report from the auditor. So that was a good point. But I also think Councilmember Nason has another good compromise, that we can simply be as transparent as possible while not incurring any more staff's time by just posting both documents. So I would be in favor of that. I would say that I think that we should not be concerned about. The one thing I don't want anyone to do is to be concerned about posting something that makes the city look bad. We did have some rough times. I think everyone has rough times. I think it's okay to document that, especially if you are moving in the right direction, which we absolutely are. So I don't want that to be a reason not to give the public as much information. But I think the council member has come up with maybe a good solution. Councilmember Nason.
Would Vice Mayor McQuaid
Anyone else?
reaction to that idea?
No, that's fine. I think personally, I think it's unnecessary, but I would not oppose it.
I don't think when we say necessary, I just want to be clear that I'm just talking about transparency. Transparency isn't, well, it is necessary, but it's an aspirational goal. We didn't meet, unfortunately, and this is not by any means a reflection on our current staff or our past staff. I mean, the software transitions can and often do fail. And we had a failed software transition, and it just is something that happened. But to be as transparent as we can be, I think is something that to do. And I agree completely with that. Putting effort into retrospective transparency when we are in such a difficult situation going forward is not a good use of resources. But I do think that giving what we have, and I'd suggest we put up the auditor's presentation, PowerPoint presentation there as well. Make that an attachment to the staff report and post that with the annual financial report.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, or is anyone ready to make a motion?
One minute.
Vice Mayor,
That we accept and file this report. And I guess I'll include in the motion posting it on the website with the staff report and the presentation from tonight.
I'll second that.
we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing no other discussion, City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Barnes,
Yes.
Councilmember Moss,
Yes.
Councilmember Nason,
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuaid,
Yes.
Mayor Pilch,
Yes.
and the motion carries.
Thank you, City Clerk. Moving on to the next agenda item. We have no next agenda items. We are on to future agenda items. And did anyone have a future agenda item to suggest? Yes, Councilmember Moss.
Yes, this is, I think, as much a proposal for our economic committee to consider as something that might come before us, but it's an idea that I had about what I think we should be looking at, that as we come out of the pandemic shutdown, and I'm not sure when that's going to happen, but at some point I have to presume we will come out, and we'll be coming out very slowly. You know, what is it going to take to get Albany going again economically? And I think the sooner that committee could start that discussion, perhaps the better, because there's all sorts of ideas that I can come up with if let loose on in that department. One of them brought on by the idea that we just agreed on a parklet, but if these restaurants on Solano are going to have to apply really strict social distancing and take out half their tables, perhaps we should be putting those tables outside on the sidewalk or in parklets. But I mean, you know, that's one off the wall idea, but there might be others. And I think the city that kind of comes up with those kind of ideas initially are going to have something up on some of our neighbors. So I'd love that discussion to start, if not on a council level, at least on a level that one of our other committees could be doing.
Thank you, Council Member. I think that's a wonderful idea. Anyone else? I will note that I did sign a letter from Mayor David Haupert, I hope I'm getting the name correct, of Dublin, requesting that the county allow housing construction to commence or recommence. Some housing construction is allowed to go forward, but the letter requests that housing construction commence with all the proper health controls in place. And I got some feedback from others that was a good letter to sign, and that will be on the consent calendar in the next meeting. And if there's no other agenda items, I'll note that we do have a few commission and committee meetings starting up again. Transportation Committee is coming up this week. And zoning next week. Board of Police and Fire Pension Fund, and the next City Council meeting will be on Monday, May 4th at 7:30 p.m. Likely, I imagine, virtual as well. And seeing as there's no other business of the city, we are adjourned.